Agbonlahor said Arsenal look tired, and as much as it pains me to say this, he's not wrong. Now look, I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, Amelia, seriously? You're going to give Gabby Agbonlahor airtime on this channel after everything he said about this club? I get it, I really do. But here's the thing, just because someone has an agenda doesn't mean they're always wrong. And the problem with dismissing everything Agbonlahor says about Arsenal, the problem is that sometimes, just sometimes, the man has a point. And right now, in this moment, with 2 trophies still within reach, I think he has a point. 57 games. Arsenal have played 57 games this season. Fulham, who they face this weekend, have played 41. That's not a scheduling quirk. That's not bad luck. That is 16 additional matches of physical output. 16 more games of sprinting, pressing, recovering, competing. 16 more nights where players got home and their bodies had to rebuild. And I want you to hold that number in your head throughout this video, because everything I'm about to say, every concern, every tactical point, every scenario, it all comes back to that gap. 57 versus 41. Right, I'm Amelia. Welcome back to the channel. If this is your first time here, we talk Arsenal, we go deep, and we try to be honest, even when honesty is uncomfortable. Drop a comment right now. Before we get into it, simple question. Do you think Arsenal are genuinely fatigued, or is this just noise? I want to know where you stand before I tell you where I stand. Hit the subscribe button if you're new. Let's get into this. So, what is actually happening here? Because I think there's a version of this conversation that is lazy. That is just, Arsenal drew in Madrid, they look tired, Arteta needs to rotate more, end of discussion. I don't want to have that conversation. That's not what this channel is for. What I want to do is understand the pattern. Because one bad performance can be explained. One difficult game away from home in Europe, that's just football. Things happen. But when you see the same problem in 2 consecutive matches, different competitions, different opponents, different stakes, same symptoms, that's not coincidence, that's a signal. Let me take you back to the Newcastle game first. Arsenal won, fine. A 1-0 victory at home, goal early, job done, 3 points, back on top of the table. On paper, great result. But did you watch that game? Did you actually watch it? Because from about the 65th minute onwards, Arsenal were barely functioning. The press, that high-intensity, relentless press that makes this team terrifying when they're right, it was gone. Players were holding their shapes, but not competing within them. You could see, and this is the thing Agbonlahor said, that I can't shake. You could see players who looked genuinely tired. Not tired in the way that all footballers get tired, tired in the way that accumulates. Tired in the way that doesn't fully go away with 2 days of recovery. And then, 4 days later, Atletico Madrid, away. Now, I want to be careful here, because the Atletico result, a draw, is not a disaster. Diego Simeone has built one of the most difficult away environments in world football. The Metropolitano is hostile. It's loud. It's designed to make visiting teams feel like they're playing uphill. A draw there, with the second leg still to come at the Emirates, you can absolutely work with that. But how Arsenal got that draw, that's what concerns me. There was no open play goal for either side. Arsenal, a team that can genuinely hurt you in transition, that has created some of the most beautiful attacking football in the Premier League this season, couldn't find a way through from open play in 90 minutes. Against a team that, let's be honest, Simeone set up to be pragmatic. And the reason they couldn't? I think it's the same reason the second half against Newcastle looked so heavy. The legs weren't there. The first touch was slightly off. The runs in behind were a half second late. The pressing triggers weren't being triggered. And when you're playing Atletico, a team that is expert at exploiting any drop in intensity, those half seconds are everything. Now here's where it gets more serious, because this isn't just about one weekend. This isn't just about managing a slightly tired squad through a mid-table Premier League fixture. What we are entering right now is the most consequential period of Arsenal's season, arguably of the last 20 years. We have the Atletico second leg at the Emirates. We potentially have a title run-in. We have Fulham this weekend, who, yes, they're lower mid-table, but they're physical, they're organised, and they've played 16 fewer games than Arsenal this season. They are fresher, they will run harder. And drop points in a game like that against a team you're expected to beat can be psychologically devastating at this stage. So this is where I want to push back. On the people who are just saying, oh, it's fine. Arsenal are a good team. They'll find a way. Maybe. But good teams that find ways, they do it because they have fresh legs to call on. They do it because their key players are operating at full capacity. They do it because their manager has managed the squad load intelligently across the season. And this brings me to the most uncomfortable part of this video, because I need to talk about Arteta. And I say this as someone who believes Mikel Arteta is one of the finest tactical minds in European football right now. I've said that on this channel repeatedly, and I stand by it. His work with this squad, the culture he's built, the identity he's created, the tactical evolution we've seen over 3 years, it's genuinely impressive. But I think there is a legitimate question about squad rotation this season that we cannot ignore anymore. Arteta has a known preference for a settled starting 11. He trusts his best players. He likes continuity. In many ways, it's a strength. Players know their roles, patterns are embedded, the team functions like a unit that has drilled its system hundreds of times. But at 57 games, that preference stops being a strength. Think about it this way. When did you last see Saka genuinely rested, not taken off at 70 minutes, when the game was already won, actually rested, left at home, told, "You're not needed today, recover"? When did you last see Odegaard, who has had his injury concerns this season, given a full week off from starting? I'm not saying Arteta is wrong to trust his best players. Of course he trusts them. They're his best players. But there is a point in a long, brutal season where protecting your best players is the tactical decision. Where resting Saka against the mid-table team is the call that wins you the Champions League. And I genuinely wonder whether that call was made consistently enough this season. Now think about this carefully, because I want to give you 3 scenarios for what happens next, and only one of them feels good. Scenario 1. Arteta reads the situation correctly. He rotates meaningfully against Fulham. He trusts Nketiah up front. He starts Jorginho in place of Odegaard, gives him license to manage the game. He rests Saka, which I know sounds terrifying, but hear me out, because Saka against Atletico at home with fresh legs is worth infinitely more than Saka limping through 90 minutes against Fulham. Arsenal win, key players recover, and by the time the Emirates erupts for that second leg, Arsenal are ready. That's the best case, and it's absolutely achievable. Scenario 2. Arteta rotates partially. He makes 2 or 3 changes, but keeps the majority of the key 11 in place, because he can't afford a slip against Fulham with the title race so tight. Arsenal grind through it. They win, maybe, but the legs get heavier. And then in the Atletico second leg, you see exactly what you saw in Madrid, a team that can't quite find the intensity to break down an organized defensive block. They draw. They go out on away goals or in extra time. That scenario is not me being dramatic. That scenario is what happens to teams that peak too early in a long season. Scenario 3. Arsenal dropped points against Fulham, not because of tactics, not because of quality, because legs that have played 57 games in 9 months simply cannot replicate the energy of legs that have played 41. And then the confidence question enters the room, and the Atletico second leg becomes something different. It becomes a must-win, under pressure, with a squad that's already running on fumes. I don't think scenario 3 happens. I want to be clear about that. I think Arsenal are too good, too experienced in big moments, too well managed for it to fall apart that dramatically. But the gap between scenario 1 and scenario 3 is not as wide as Arsenal fans want to believe right now. And here's the thing that nobody is really saying. Atletico know this. You think Simeone looked at that Arsenal performance in the first leg and didn't notice the fatigue? You think his analysts haven't broken down the Newcastle second half and identified the moments when Arsenal's press dropped? Of course they have. That's what Simeone does. He finds the crack, he waits, and he exploits. That is precisely why I think the Fulham game, which on paper should be the least complicated fixture on the calendar right now, might actually be the most important decision Arteta makes all season. Because it's not really about Fulham. It's about how Arsenal arrive at the Emirates for the Atletico second leg. Are they rested? Are they sharp? Are their best players at full capacity? Or are they carrying the accumulated weight of a 60-game season on legs that have not been properly managed? That is the real question. And it connects to something bigger that I think Arsenal fans need to sit with. We have spent 3 years watching this squad grow, watching them compete, watching them fall just short. And every time we've said next year the squad is deeper. Next year, Arteta will have more options. Next year, we won't be relying on 12 players to carry us through 60 games. And in many ways, this year has been different. The squad is deeper. The options are there. So the question I keep coming back to, the one that genuinely frustrates me is, if the depth is there, why are we still seeing the same tired legs in the same crucial moments? That's not a squad problem anymore. That's a management decision. And Arteta, who I believe in, I need to keep saying that. Arteta is not above scrutiny here. Look, I want to be honest about something. There's a part of me, the Arsenal fan part of me, not the analyst part that wants to just say, they'll be fine. Saka will find an extra gear. Odegaard will produce something magical. Havertz will run himself into the ground, because that's what Havertz does, and will win both trophies, and this entire conversation will look like overreaction. Maybe that happens. I genuinely hope it does. But the analyst in me, the person who watches every match, who tracks pressing stats and recovery distances, and the way a team's shape changes in the 75th minute of a long game, that part of me cannot look at 57 games versus 41 and feel comfortable. That gap is real. That gap has physical consequences, and those consequences are playing out right now, in real time, in the performances we are watching. So where does that leave us? It leaves us with this. The next 10 days might be the most important 10 days of Mikel Arteta's managerial career at this football club. The decisions he makes, not just tactically, not just in terms of formation or pressing triggers, but in terms of who he protects, who he rests, how he manages the physical load of his squad, those decisions could be the difference between Arsenal winning something historic and Arsenal falling short for another year. The talent is there. Nobody is questioning that. The system is there. The identity is there. The belief, honestly. You still feel it from this squad. Even in the tired performances, the belief is still there. But belief runs on legs. And right now, the legs are tired. And I think Arteta knows it. I think he sees it in training. I think he sees it in the data. The question is whether he trusts his squad deeply enough to rest the players who need resting, even if it means accepting a degree of risk against Fulham. That's the call. That's the decision. And it might be the one that defines this season. So I'll leave you with this. Do you trust Arteta to get this right? not tactically, not in terms of system or shape or who presses where, but in terms of the human management, the squad load, the protection of his key players at the most important moment. Do you trust him? Because I do. Not blindly, not without concern, but I do. And I think if he gets this right, over the next 10 days, if he rotates intelligently, if he arrives at that second leg against Atletico with a squad that has something left, then we are going to witness something genuinely extraordinary at the Emirates. But if the legs aren't there, if we arrive at that game carrying everything we've been carrying since August, then we're going to find out if belief alone is enough. And historically, for Arsenal, it hasn't always been. I'm Amelia. Drop a comment, do you trust Arteta's squad management right now? Yes or no? I'll be reading every single one. See you in the next one.